Hi, welcome to our presentation. I'm Shreyan Fresta along with my group members. The topic case of our presentation is Australian case Falas versus Mollars 2006. The case is about the four friends, including plaintiff and defendant, where defendant is Alexander Falas and the plaintiff is Cole Mollars. The four friends, including defendant and plaintiff, use vehicle to drive into the bush of Bathurst, searching kangaroos at night 10:30. Um, the vehicle was driven by the defendant, and the passenger seat was occupied by the plaintiff. And the spotlights was held by the plaintiff and put in the windows, and the other men were getting out of the vehicle and shooting the kangaroos. At some time, the defendant stopped the vehicle and he get out of the vehicle to join the shooting party and he took the gun with him. Then the plaintiff took a charge and he drove the vehicle. After some time, the defendant he tried to come into the vehicle with a loaded gun. And then, after knowing that the plaintiff, he tried to stop that not to enter into the vehicle with the loaded gun, but then the defendant reassured him that it's safe. Now, I would like to pass my presentation to my friend Virginia for the presentation.
Hi there, this is Farzana. Today I'm going to talk about the case stated by Farzana, where I will be explaining on the side from defendant and I'll be providing counter arguments on the side of the defendant, as it clearly states in the fact that the main issue of the case was the defendant negligently using a gun and injuring the plaintiff on the leg. If we look closely into the facts, we can see straight away that the activity itself was very risky, and the plaintiff and the defendant both were fully aware of the harm, and they can assume the harm, which is very foreseeable by both of the party because it involves gun and shooting. And from the defendant point of view, we can argue on the side of Civil Liability Act 2002, which say in the section 5L, which states that the person cannot be held liable for negligence if the persons involved in the case are in such a situation of dangerous recreational activity which can bring obvious risk to any person involved in the activity of dangerous recreation because of the materialization of the obvious risk related to the activity. So which means it does not, this law also states that it does not matter whether the plaintiff is aware of the risk or not, as the activity itself is a harm-induced activity. And the other issues can be provided that when the defendant went out with a loaded gun, the people outside of the vehicle could get harmed as well. So as the activity itself provides the foreseeability of such a risk, it can be argued from the defendant, and by the Act of Civil Liability Act, he is not liable to the physical harm done to the plaintiff. Now I'm gonna pass it to my friend who will talk about the judgment of the court and how it went. Thank you.
Hi there, this is Santos here. So about the judgmental of the court, Felix was identified as responsible for his negligence act. The judge quick decisively held that plaintiff was injured and the injury was caused by the Felix negligence, and the judge also refused to accept the contention that the plaintiff himself engaged in recreational activities, and which is stated in section 5K, and said that holding a spotlight is not a very dangerous event of recreational activities. She also supported that the injury of Morlas was suffered was not from his risks of recreational activities but the negligence done by the defendant Felix, and it was held that plaintiff would be awarded with $98,467, which should be given by the defendant Felix, and a further appeal was made by Felix, which was dismissal with the cost on the ground that the risk was totally on the negligence of his act and not on the ground of dangerous recreational activities by plaintiff. And my friend will discuss on the critical analysis of the court decision.
Hi. The court had given such a verdict, which went against my chosen party, which was the dependent party, and the following critical analysis can be given, which will highlight the reason that caused the dependent party not winning the case. First of all, the court made sure that Morlos was not in a situation of dangerous recreational activity during the time of his accident or the injury, because at the time Morlas was just holding the spotlight and not using the arms or handguns. Second, when Follis was making the handgun on jam, many call of attention was given from the plaintiff that the defendant should not get into the vehicle with the loaded handgun. Third, during the time of unjamming of the handgun, the defendant gave assurance to the plaintiff that the handgun was not loaded with must go with the situation negligence. Thus, the situation of negligence will go with the plaintiff, and that will go against the intents of the defendant. Fourth, during the process of unjamming the handgun, the defendant pointed the gun in the direction of the plaintiff, which the defendant must have done unintentionally, but that was a sign of negligence from the defendant, as he could have done this by pointing the handgun to a safe direction and avoided the situation. However, this went wrong, and an accidental discharge of the handgun or an accidental shot was made by the defendant that hit the plaintiff on the leg, that sustained him with severe injuries. Fourth, the court did not accept that the situation on which the plaintiff and the defendant were standing in a situation of an obvious risk, because at that time the defendant or Fallas was not hunting the kangaroos with the help of the spotlight held by the plaintiff. Rather, at the very moment that defendant was clocking the handgun back and forth of making it jam free. This is seen as the situation of not an obvious risk. Rather, it was seen as a risk-free situation by the court. Thus, the court gave verdict against Fallas and rewarded Morlos with monetary benefit that will be given by Fallas. Sixth, the defendant also made an appeal in the court against the decision that was dismissed by keeping the reward intact to the plaintiff on the ground of the fact that the risk was not obvious and the dangerous recreational activity was not there for a plaintiff. And last, here is conclusion. The assignment was depicting the famous case known as the Fallas versus Morlos 2006, and this was about the negligence made by the defendant against the plaintiff when they went for hunting kangaroos with the help of a spotlight. In the first phase, the introduction of the case was given, which followed with the fact related with the case. As I have chosen the defendant side for representation, so the issue raised by defendant were given. In the next phase, the arguments presented by the defendant were outlined, which followed with the verdict of the court. In the last part of the assignment, critical analysis was presented from the defendant's perspective about reasons from them for losing the case.
So this was a presentation.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.